What's going on, everybody? I'm back with another video, and this video is just going to be a total prediction on what Tuchel will do at Chelsea. It looks like he won't be able to make it on the bench for the first game. He hasn't been in training, but we'll get updates, obviously. I have no idea. But tactically, it's going to be really interesting to see how he sets up this Chelsea team. Because of the squad issues. People weren't happy before. Some people were, some people weren't, as always. So Tuchel will decide who he favors and what position, and he has some really interesting problems to take care of tactically. Some different options he can go with, and some people out of form, some people in form. So we'll get right into it. So in the beginning third, it looks like he'll take a positional play approach. And the first problem is the center back issue with Rudiger out of favor, and Colin seems to be falling out of favor with the fans as well. We'll see if he can get back into the side, get back to playing his best. But if not, Zuma, he's been a consistent player with Silva alongside him. And Silva for PSG played on the right-hand side. But it seems like Chelsea lack really strong left-footed playmaker as a center back. So it'll be interesting to see how he first adapts this problem. So he might just stick with Silva and Zuma on the right, Zuma on the left. But the comfort on the ball is something that Chelsea seems to lack in a deeper area. So Silva played on the right because of his right foot, and that's where he played for PSG. So I'm predicting it'll stay the same. And then I think the next big change will be Jorginho will come into the side, and he'll play more as a Julian Weigl when Tuchel was at Dortmund, and seems like Jorginho's role will be similar to his at Sarri and when Chelsea was under the management of Sarri, but I think that Kovacic will also play a crucial role just because of his versatility, being able to play in more advanced roles, but also being comfortable coming deeper. And then I think Mount will start in the side. It looks like playing the same sort of way, using asymmetry as what we've seen from Tuchel in the past. So using an asymmetric midfield shape will be the start. And I'm just going to set up this team in the 4-3-3 on how they would deal with this. So the asymmetry to start in the midfield, he'll have a 3-2 build-up shape with Mendy in goal, Silva in the back with Zuma, and then the asymmetric midfield shape with the double pivot to start in the first third of build-up, and then an attacking midfielder providing asymmetry in the advanced area in the half space. And it seems Tuchel does this for many reasons. One, because it's harder to defend if you have to defend slightly differently on both sides. Each side has their own space that they're trying to exploit and concepts. But then the fullbacks, it seems, will start wider or slightly narrow, and they might even start almost on the same line, which then comes the horizontal versatility of these players. So now James or Ziyech would be able to pick for themselves based on the scenario whether James would become more narrow, then Ziyech would counter movement his wide position. But for now, I'm going to start them a little bit on the same line. We'll even start James out wide and Ziyech narrow to exploit the space for the double pivot to try and stretch the defense, which is more likely than playing in the wide areas. So now we have our front three, and just based on the personnel he had at PSG, obviously PSG had more proven professionals like Neymar, Mbappe, so they were these big name players, but their qualities are slightly similar, very direct, pacey players. So that's why I went with Pulisic on the left, Werner on the right, Werner through the center, and Ziyech on the right, because they are similar, very pacey, direct players, looking to get in behind. Ziyech obviously more of a playmaker. He can come in between the lines. That's why Mount's on the left, so Ziyech can come inside on the right. So we have asymmetry, but we have personnel to exploit both spaces. And then really these players will be interesting how he uses them defensively, because these players, I feel, are very good at pressing quickly. They have huge counter-pressing potential, especially with the midfielders as well. And we can't forget about Conte too. He will probably come into the side whenever he's ready. I checked today, I think he's injured, but he might not. So he could replace Mount or Kovacic, probably Kovacic if the Kovacic situation doesn't work out. He can also replace Jorginho, but Jorginho is more of a natural passer. He's better at finding advanced areas, breaking lines. He's better on the ball a little bit, while Conte is more versatile. He can play many different roles. He's great in the pressing defensive situations, transitions. So it'll be interesting. I wouldn't be surprised if Kovacic dropped out, Conte went in, or maybe even Mount came out for a little bit. And so, but let's get back to it. So we have on the right, we have James and Ziyech, and again, the asymmetry provided. If they're looking to exploit the wide areas, Ziyech would come narrow, playing between the lines. Werner would stretch in behind with Pulisic, and they might even play more asymmetrically than this, more narrow, to try and extend the space between the lines. James would advance, ball might be played to Silva, and if this is the picture, Silva will probably come more narrow to create separation between himself and the winger who's pressing him. So when the ball is played and the press comes, there'll be more time and space to play this lofted ball into James to then progress. But one key trend is the rondo-like situations that Tuchel's team can create using the double pivot. So what I mean by this is when building from the back, usually the center backs are the base of this diamond shape in the half space, and now they'll try and create these 4v2 situations to create numerical advantages to then progress the ball. And I'll show you what I mean by this in a second, just highlighting the players involved. So now, with Kovacic involved, we have our forward, our midfield, depends how they shift, our fullback, midfielder. So now we essentially have a 4v2 because there are only 2 active defenders in this rondo situation here. So we have 1 active defender, 2 active defenders, and then the fullback, obviously, he influences the play, but he's not an active defender because he would have to go through Ziyech to access the passing lane, and then defend. It depends how the midfield shifts, might create more, but this is a general situation that we'll see. And then obviously, if the fullback jumps, there's space in behind for Werner. So there's a lot of potential for continuity in the way Tuchel plays. So now, on the weak side, we can see the same situation with Zuma, Chilwell, Jorginho, and Mount. And then on this side, it's a little bit different because Pulisic, so he would probably come into the wider area and then maybe do a different situation with the numerical advantage. He might be a pinning player or looking to stretch the team in behind. So the asymmetry here has huge potential, creating numerical advantages in the first third of the field. So now we'll look at some trends that we've seen from Tuchel in the midfield third. So I'm just going to set these players up, And obviously the personnel with Kai Havertz on the bench, I expect he'll get into the team at some point. But it seems kind of, especially in the midfield, he might be able to play as an attacking midfielder, but I don't see him as versatile as Kovacic and Jorginho in the build-up phase, especially, just because he's very much an attacking player, someone who plays between the lines and in the final third of the field. So, from what I've seen from Tuchel, is at least two of his midfielders very versatile, can play as 6 or 8s. So it'll be interesting to see what goes on with Kai Havertz getting into the team. This is kind of a deeper setup than I intended. Alright, I'm going to have to adjust them a little bit. It might be a little too narrow, but alright. Then we have Silva, Zuma, and then this is where we'll see the effects of Jorginho and using more of a double pivot in the first third of the field, and what the first progression and like the first transformation, if you want to adopt that term, what it will look like in the mid block. So here we are. It might be a little too deep, but we get the idea. So with James Chilwell, I think they might play more narrow. Maybe we'll switch it up, asymmetry, because Tuchel is pretty predictable when it comes. His teams will use asymmetry one way or another. So in this situation, against two forwards, I expect Jorginho or who's ever playing as the holding midfielder will drop between the center backs so they can fan out, and now we have a ball, a deep line ball player in each of the central 3 corridors, which might cause Chilwell and James to advance, but he might use minimum width and create this diagonal relationship between Pulisic or the winger and Chilwell, but we'll have to see. Kovacic will come as a pivot, and then this is why I picked Mount over Kai Havertz, at least to start, because with Jorginho dropping, he might want to keep the 3-2 relationship between the first and second line consistent. So in that case, Mount would be a more natural role, but even Conte then, when he's fit, he might come in to play as this role just because they're more natural, they're more versatile, and they're more accustomed to this role as a pivot or double pivot. So with this, then it would be a 3-2 build-up. Maybe he'll look to advance the ball through his center backs progressing it themselves through the half spaces, but I think he might try and find in the central area first, because when the ball is played into the center area first, this pretty much collapses the defense, breaks their structure, and then this is when there's space in the wide areas and between the lines because of the midfielders being drawn out. So we'll see how he looks to progress in his favored way. Obviously, they'll have multiple different ways and systems at play to progress and be versatile, but we will see. And then again, we have the rondos taking a different shape, just a slightly more asymmetric rondo, which we've gotten into before in past videos on why they do this. But this could also be a key. But then also we can look, so we can have these wide area rondos for a more wide progression. But then I think with the pace they have in the team, the versatility from the players, if Ziyech comes between the lines and Pulisic, I don't see him as a player who plays between the lines very much, but if maybe Kai Havertz came in the side, he could play on the wing for Ziyech or Pulisic, but we'll keep Pulisic in there just for right now. Then maybe we can look at a more central progressive model and or this being a way to affect the defense to try and narrow them to then exploit players in the wide areas. So what this would look like would be almost a four-man midfield with occupation in both the half spaces, diagonal passes going from the double pivot into the advanced players, and Werner stretching the line. So if the defender would step, there's always the out ball or the release if they're under a lot of pressure. This is something that I didn't see too much. So if they're being pressed pretty adequately, then with Werner behind, Ziyech coming deeper, they can always play that bigger ball in behind as a release of pressure. And then with the pace they have in their team, I think they should be able to press, counter press more aggressively. And that's kind of what I'm looking for from Tuchel, to see if he can get this team to counter press and live up to their potential, because they have the pace, the quality, and the versatility and the time in the side to do so. So that's one of the biggest things I'm looking at from his side, is how they're going to do in transition, because they have the players to do it, and even someone like Werner might benefit greatly from it. From his time at Leipzig, they played very high pressing, counter pressing. And then Werner flourished there, so maybe that could solve some problems, but maybe not. And then now we'll look at how they go about in attacking a low block. So I'm just setting up the pieces here. We'll stick with a 4-4-2. Maybe we'll go to a 4-5-1, as teams often do that. And if Chelsea have a more methodical approach, more positional play, it might seem like they'll move forward with playing against 4-5-1s if they are able to control the ball really well and whatnot. But in this situation, in a 4-5-1, it might change up a little bit. So we might see a single pivot here, and then the asymmetry start over again, and with Jorginho as a central defender, just in the offensive phase. But we might even see him come through on the right, or on the left, I mean. Maybe on the other side as well. Just depends how he sets up the team. And then the interactions of the fullbacks. I'd like to see some more versatility. I know James and Chilwell are really effective in the wide areas. But back to Jorginho, we might see him dropping in the first line to progress the ball himself, to then pick a passing option. Or we might see the double pivot again from Mount and Kovacic, or whoever's playing this role, and then their rest defense, super important in positional play for coaches who have a similar approach. So Tuchel is definitely one of them. So we'll see a 3-2 rest defense shape. But again, this might change. We could see a 2-3 or this 3-2. And then the 3-2 gives the center backs more mobility, obviously, to progress the ball themselves. Pulisic can come inside, and then we can see a Rondo on the weak side as well. But it's really up to them. Werner, I don't expect him to play between the lines as much as he did under Lampard. I know a lot of times I saw him picking up the ball between the lines, and I just don't think that suits him as a player. I think he's more effective when he's in behind, playing on the shoulder of the defenders, and then even if he's trying to stretch them, playing in the offside position, and then the ball is going wide, then he's there when the defenders drop. He has positional superiority over his defender, and then he can get on end of low crosses or cutbacks or what have you. But that's pretty much a basic way how I think Tuchel will approach this Chelsea job, and I think it's really interesting. He's got a lot of key pieces and a lot of interesting pieces to work with, so it's going to be super interesting how he sets his team up, how he looks to play, transitioning from the Frank Lampard team to making this team his own, how he's going to use all these pieces together. So Whenever he gets his first game, maybe in a week or 2 weeks, when he sets up his team, I'm going to make a video on what I got right, what I got wrong, and how his team actually set up. So please like and subscribe to the channel. If you like my other videos, I know I use Keyframe a lot. I'll post that link in this one too, even though this wasn't made using Keyframe. So please like and subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you in the next one.